Hello. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about these prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, and namely what these organelles are and why they're important. So we're going to look at the eukaryotic cell first. You can find this note page that looks exactly like this in our Files tab in Teams under Unit 12 Cells, and then this is the one that just says Cell Notes. So feel free to go look there. You could also make your own note page if you don't have a printer. But if you do, I suggest go ahead and print this out because there's going to be all kinds of good information on here. First things first, we've got a eukaryotic cell. And there's two different types of eukaryotic cells. There's an animal cell. We're animals, so our cells look like this. And then we have plant cells, and plant cells kind of look like this. They're more square. They've got a rigid outer layer. All these things in the middle are things that both these cells have in common. The plant cells are kind of special because you can see they've got chloroplast and an animal cell doesn't. And a plant cell also has a cell wall, and animal cells don't have a cell wall either. But we're going to talk about all the things we have in common first. So the first one is the cell membrane. And a cell membrane is really cool because it controls what can get in and out of the cell. It is a protective layer, if you will. So I'm going to write protective layer and then controls in and out. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about is a vacuole. And a vacuole is simply a fluid-filled sac that your cell uses for storage. So think of it like your closet or like a tote maybe in your closet. So a vacuole, really easy, just the storage. Now you can kind of see the size difference here. If you follow this arrow, to the animal cell, that vacuole is pretty small. But if you come over here to this big old giant vacuole in the plant cell, it's way bigger, right? So the plant cell uses the vacuoles, I think, to store water or something cool, but they need more space than a plant cell. So there's a big size difference between the vacuole and the plant and the animal cell. Next, we have a really fun one to say, mitochondria. The mitochondria breaks down food and it releases energy. So here we're just going to put that it breaks down food. So if you follow your arrows, there is a mitochondria in the animal cell, and it kind of looks almost the same for the plant cell. So mitochondria breaks down the food. Next on the list is a ribosome, and a ribosome makes the proteins. So all we're going to put here is make proteins. I had to kind of squish it in there. That says proteins, kind of. Okay, I tried. Next on our list is the nucleus, and the nucleus is the brain of the cell. This is where you're going to find the DNA in a eukaryotic cell. This one right here is the main big difference between a prokaryotic and a eukaryotic cell. Super important, this nucleus right here. So here's a nucleus in a plant cell, and then here's the nucleus in there's a nucleus in an animal cell. There's a nucleus in a plant cell. Goodness. So they contain the DNA, and it's the brain. So I'll just leave it at that, the DNA and the brain. Now the next one is one of my other favorites to say. I like to say mitochondria, and I also like to say endoplasmic reticulum. Endoplasmic reticulum. And really the super easy breakdown of what that does is it moves stuff. That's what the endoplasmic reticulum does in a cell. It moves materials around the cell. So I'm just going to write right here, moves stuff. That's all you really need to know about the endoplasmic reticulum. Next, last but not least, for this in the middle list that have both, is the cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is still kind of fun to say, but it's the fluid that fills the cell. It holds the organelles to keep them kind of up. You can think of it kind of like a jelly or like jello or something along those lines. Like things can still kind of move around in it. Like the endoplasmic reticulum can still scoot around and move things where they need to be. But that cytoplasm is kind of like a jelly. So it's fluid that fills the cell. Okay, fluid that fills the cell. Now, that is, come back on, lights. There we go. Next, we're going to move over to just the plant cell. And the plant cell has some super cool stuff in it that animal cells don't have because plants do photosynthesis. And in order for a plant to be able to do photosynthesis, which is where they take the energy from the sun and they turn it into food that the plant needs to survive, they need what's called a chloroplast. And a chloroplast captures the light. It captures light energy so that the plant can actually do photosynthesis. So I'm just going to put captures light for chloroplast. And the other thing that plant cells have that animal cells don't have is this rigid outer layer here. It's called a cell wall. And if you look outside at any tree or if you have a plant in your house, you can see that that plant isn't just a wobbly ball of jello, right? It actually stands up. It's rigid. If you go out and try to bend a tree limb, there is structure there. And that comes from this cell wall. And really all it is a strong, rigid outer layer for support and protection for the cells. So we're going to put strong outer layer. Strong outer layer. Now down here we've got characteristics of a eukaryotic cell. We talked about all of these yesterday. The first one, most important, is, hopefully you remember, U equals you have a nucleus. And by you, I mean, yes, you. You are an animal. We all are as humans, and our cells have a nucleus. So when I say you have a nucleus, I mean you have a nucleus. Pretty cool, right? Okay, if you remember, yesterday we said that they're larger than the prokaryotic cell. They're organized. They have organelles, and that's all these things that we just listed right here. These are all organelles. And the examples are plants and animals. Okay, so that is it for a closer look at eukaryotic cells. Let's flip this paper over and talk about the prokaryotic cells. Bacteria, things like that. So bacteria have some things kind of like a eukaryotic cell, but this little tail-like thing over here, that's a flagella, and a flagella is just a tail. So you can put tail right there. They also do have a cell membrane, like the eukaryotic cell. Y'all remember what a cell membrane is? Cell membrane, we wrote down that it is the protective layer and controls in and out. So protective layer controls in and out. Okay, and then we also have some cytoplasm in this prokaryotic cell. And if you remember, cytoplasm is that ooey gooey jelly, that liquid that fills the cell, or the fluid that fills the cell. Okay, over here you see these little dots. We talked about the ribosomes. Did we talk about ribosomes? We didn't talk about ribosomes. That's okay, because ribosomes are the organelle that makes proteins. And prokaryotic cells have these. Okay, so ribosomes make the proteins. And then here we have some DNA as well. And DNA, if you recall, is the genetic information. Now the difference, the big, huge difference between prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell, we've got this nucleus, and here is the DNA. That DNA is inside that nucleus. It's very well protected. In a prokaryotic cell, there is no nucleus. This DNA, that's this little stringy looking thing right here. It's just hanging out there. There's nothing to protect that DNA. There is no nucleus there. That DNA just kind of floats around and does whatever it wants to do. There is no nucleus in this prokaryotic cell. Now, these notes, just like we took yesterday, we'll just remind you real quick. Pro equals no nucleus. Prokaryotic cells are really small, even compared to how small a eukaryotic cell is. They're disorganized. We made some pictures yesterday about what they might look like. There's like a grain of rice, a circle one. We might have a little swirly one, kind of like that. And then you remember the slinky? If we pull a slinky apart, it might kind of look like this. I mean, I'm not really an artist, but you kind of get the idea. They might be kind of swirly like that. And a good example is bacteria. I hope this kind of helps you understand a little bit about what organelles are and the difference between this prokaryotic cell and this eukaryotic cell. I mean, just look at the difference here. There's a ton of organelles in these eukaryotic cells, and this prokaryotic cell, I mean, we got DNA. That's not a membrane-bound organelle. We got ribosomes. There's just not very much in there. It's just not much there. But y'all are amazing. And if you have any questions, make sure that you let me know, and we will answer the questions below. We'll see you tomorrow.